I'm talking today to John Mulhall. He's based in Dublin. He used to be in the Irish Army, but he has a slightly new career at the moment. He is an author now. He wrote a book. So, uh, John, just if you can tell the listeners and the viewers a small bit who John is, what does John do in daily life, and what are your passions? In a
Sure,
nutshell.
sure. Hi, Dirk. Thanks for having me here today. Um, yeah, my name is John Mulhall. I go by the pen name John A. Mulhall, A for Anthony, of course. That's my middle name. And I am a former member of the 29th Infantry Battalion. That was my last post before I left the Irish Army after the Good Friday Agreement. I was based on the border of Monaghan. And I became a manager 12 years in financial operations. And then when I left financial operations, I retrained as an engineer, qualified 2017. And I've been doing mainly cloud engineering ever since, on the infrastructure side in particular, including DevOps. So my authoring passions, for want of a better word, have been around since I was a child. They have kind of stayed with me in the background up until I started to blog around tech in particular. I started to do some journalism for Irish Tech News as a regular contributor in 2016. And that whole flow led me into relooking at my writing passion. And of course, a good writer writes a little bit of himself or herself into their books. They always put a little bit of fact, kernel fact, into any fictional story, which makes it good and believable. And that's what I did. One of the things that moved me into writing From Terror to Valor was 9/11. So I had cousins involved in 9/11 and FDNY. My cousin I was quite close to was bar owner right beside the Twin Towers when they went down, and the trauma that his family went through in 9/11 and how he stood up and he converted his Merc into an ambulance and got as many people into the lower basement before it was 8 stories. 4 stories were lost as the buildings fell. The that I suppose epoch, or not epoch, that milestone in terrorism being 9/11 was and is still noted today around the world. But what is not noted, I have found through research since 2018, is the tales of those who have been involved since. So there are too many to fit into any book or
Hmm.
any series of books to tell everybody's story. But certainly, picking out fictional characters in a fictional story and having them as very, very, what's the word, vaguely representative was my goal. So I had a protagonist being Jack DeBow, former US Army Ranger, bad experience with Desert Storm, retrained as an engineer, and he got involved with CIA initially as an engineer and then became involved in the murky world of intelligence, counterintelligence and counterterrorism. And on the antagonist side, you have a rich Saudi national called Saad al-Sahoni, and he was involved with jihad in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen, and his flow on his inner battles sent him on a different course, which placed him as a fictional character down the antagonist side. When he became involved in Al Qaeda, into ISIS at the Al Nusra merger in 2014, and his journey then through the years up until I won't spoil it for readers, but or viewers,
Yeah.
is the final in the book where one might say is it done, is it not, what happened to these guys, do they exist, do they not? So very much structured in the thriller genre, to be able to lay out plots that are there, and not only on the terrorism side, but also with all terrorist activity, there's always a very large infrastructure behind them that supports them. Everything from the economics of garnering, taking over areas, converting them for their own use, what lies beneath the surface in terms of motivation is never discussed. It's never really, there's never really a light shone upon it. It's very much in the shadow world, and
Yeah.
that's something that I wanted to explore in my writing
And that's
of
and the
From
name of
Terror
your
to
book.
Valor.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was the name of the book is From Terror to Valor, and there's a subtitle as well, is there? Or
There is echoes and shadows,
Echoes and shadows.
and that's really the theme of the book. Um,
Yeah.
it really is a murky world where up is down, down is up, and if you blink again, your reality has changed. That's we see that on an ever increasing basis on social media when
Mm,
people are becoming influenced, unduly influenced. And we see it in other areas as well. And one could, quite rightly wonder, are they all linked? Is there a larger plan at play? And then, of course, the emergence of Project 2025. I was gobsmacked when I saw it because it's like as if they're trying to sow spoilers for my book. And it became public knowledge, in the US just 2 to 3 weeks before launch. And I was like, hold on a minute, guys. I should be charging you royalties for making up this evil plan.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah, yeah. Social media, I think, has really, I suppose, facilitated to an extent this murky world of terrorism and counterterrorism and what have you. And especially nowadays with so much misinformation and disinformation going about. I mean, it's
Yep.
called misinformation, disinformation now, but really the name of it is propaganda. That's really what that all is, and that's what and the fake news. There's one group, it's called propaganda, but you can subdivide it then. So yeah, I think social media has a role to play in that, and quite a big role. So but the book is inspired by the 9/11 events. You're saying, were you in any way involved yourself? Not involved as, but were you called up for duty or whatever when after the events? Or
I was a number of years out of the Irish Army. I could have been recalled under my contract if required, but I was not, of course. Being in Ireland, it's we're a non-aligned country, or people like to call us neutral.
yeah,
The politics of the day seems to term us as that. But as a non-aligned country by government policy, we weren't, activated, and those of fighting age weren't brought back because the direct threat wasn't to us. But like so many Irish men and women across the land are sitting in New York, and in 9/11, Al Qaeda decided to make a statement.
yeah,
That statement brought down the buildings on um, individuals who are in New York, who term themselves either native born or immigrants, naturalized Americans. They term themselves as New Yorkers. And those New Yorkers include people from all over the world, including my own relatives and cousins. There was a few of them in FDNY. One of them appeared on the front cover, Jerry Riley of People Weekly, and another one like my cousin Connie, may he rest in peace. He was the bar owner, joint bar owner with a pal of his from the U.S. Army on at Harris, and that was right beside Ground Zero when it fell. So, the my story can be reflected in so many in terms of New Yorkers from all over the world.
yeah,
There was no, it was one term American, but it's really a number of different origin points that make up the New
yeah.
York population.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, actually, I remember that day to this day as well. So I was actually working for a company called Cable Wireless, a telecommunication company, and we had clients in those two buildings, and I was talking to people just before the attacks happened. It's unbelievable, really, when you think of it. You talk to someone 10 minutes before, and then you
Yep.
get. I went for a break, and they say, "Well, guess what's after happening?" So yeah,
Huh?
that
Yeah,
was an amazing day. Now
it was.
you mentioned you left your army after the Good Friday. It was after or just before the Good Friday agreement?
It was about 2 months. Like, we had our intelligence was good, so there wasn't going to be much to do up until the Good Friday Agreement was signed.
Yeah,
And then anything after that was administrative, like criminality in terms of diesel running and stuff like that is not the reason why I joined the army.
yeah,
It's a Garda issue. Soldiers help the guards in what was dangerous country at one time.
yeah. Well, but so you did you served the Monaghan, so that's near to the border. Have you seen any Were you involved in any conflicts there prior to that, or didn't you see did you notice anything there really?
Well, big shout out to my comrades, men and women from the 29th Infantry Battalion. There's an association now of where my battalion's demobilized, our battalion, shall I say, is demobilized. But the good folks, my comrades in the 29th Infantry Battalion, would have their own stories to tell, but a lot of it is still classified. So the I suppose in terms of what we did as a battalion, we were the only operational battalion in the country outside of the Rangers, our Special Forces service. And the I suppose the difference between us as a light infantry battalion could be equated to U.S. Army Rangers, funnily enough. Because they would work in unusual theaters of unusual tasking, and ours is no different. We operated in an unusual environment where the battle of wits that one normally associates with spies and intelligence agents and intelligence assets was something that we performed on a daily basis. And it wasn't like, a standard job where, I could get a job as let's say an IT engineer or a DevOps engineer, and I would work a shift, maybe 8 hours, 10, 12 hours, and then that's it, I'm done for the day. Our lives were not like that. They had a subliminal requirement to be always aware. And it's that behind the lines mentality that spies are often credited for, was something that every battalion member had to do, because loosely, I heard a colleague of mine quote a World War II phrase: "Loose lips sink ships."
Yeah.
And it's that concept of intelligence, counterintelligence, and anybody who's served on the border, even like in terms of reinforcements from further south, be it the different commands, would be aware of, the threat posed by, paramilitary organizations who would be quite skilled. Certainly Provisional IRA were quite skilled at intelligence gathering. So those type of what were once highly classified intelligence briefings will be given to us, and we'd be given direction on how to deal with that. So building a skill set around that was a very was a large part of our lives rather than our jobs, due to the fact that once you're known, you're known, and that's another part of the cat and mouse game that is often associated with the intelligence world.
Good, good. And after the army, you say you went to the finance industry, so to speak. How much of a change was that? How
Oh, it was.
easy was it to adapt for you?
Well, looking back, I have to chuckle because when I left the army, I had about a year. I had to sort my own head out after service, even the short short stay of service that I had. Um, and by doing so, becoming a little bit clearer on my own path ahead, I hadn't a clue what I was going to do. So I ended up, going back to my secondary school or high school counselor, and asking him, what should I do? I'm lost here. And he looked at my aptitude tests, and he said, you're great at maths, so go study finance and accounting. Bye. So that was me off to the finance world, just literally without any thought of passion, longevity, or what I'm going to do. But the leadership skills that I learned in the army became very apparent when I got into finance. I think I was about 2 years before I became a team leader, and then came to be at the end of my 15 years following that, I was a manager, level 2 manager. So I had 3 teams. And by the time that came up, I decided to take a sabbatical and figure out the rest of what I should have figured out when I left the army. How am I going to marry my passion? And technology came up very strongly. So I took the step of moving forward with that, and it's been an unusual journey, transitioning across and restarting again. But at the end of the day, it's all about leadership and commitment. If you commit to yourself, provide yourself that leadership path, and chart a goal, you can project manage your own career change, no matter what age you are. No barrier to that, only perceived ones. So that's what I did.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can fully appreciate that. I have had a few
Mm.
career changes myself throughout the year. So yeah,
Yep.
and looking back, I think they all stood to me to one way or another. But at the moment,
You do bring across incremental skills and knowledge with you,
yeah,
I think, even
exactly.
if the industries aren't directly related. Yeah.
exactly. And so, but now you're aside from your new step or new diversion into authorship, you're also a cloud engineer. So what? I mean, I'm a wee bit technical, but cloud engineering to me is still a bit of a new concept. So what does that entail?
It's cloud engineer is basically an IT and DevOps engineer. You would be a Linux engineer that would be familiar with operating systems, infrastructure, how it works, and how to deploy it. But except you have cool new tools that would be used in the cloud. So I predominantly worked in AWS infrastructure. So the AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Oracle Cloud or they would all manage the networking aspect of the infrastructure you're using. Where the job for somebody like me as a cloud engineer would be to manage the your company's resources that would be used. And one of the things that separates cloud from the likes of on-premise networks or data farms is cost. The cost is completely different. But if you don't understand the differences, you can end up bankrupting your company. I heard a
Yeah,
story in 2017 or maybe 2018. There was a startup in Ireland. They had a great product. They completely underestimated how well it was going to do, and they didn't have any limitations on their AWS infrastructure. And I'm sure it scaled indefinitely. People were just loving it, but it was all free. So the AWS charges ended up, within 2 or 3 days to be 20, 25 grand, and they had to go bankrupt. So,
yeah,
the premise of a cloud engineer, unlike, a Linux engineer that would be working on, data or your own servers that you physically own, or an on-premise network environment. The skills there have to be very what's the word? They have to be wider.
mm,
And they have to be more holistic in terms of what a cloud engineer does. But it's basically an infrastructure engineer that works on the cloud instead of on local equipment. But yeah, as a cloud engineer, you have to know what they are as well. So my 2 years at Oracle was very good in getting into routers, switches, bus bars, that type of thing. The coolant aspect of data center was interesting for me.
yeah. I have to say, I did a small bit on Cisco networking. I was trying to get into it, and it actually it did my head in some stage. So I gave up. But also the say the tutors. It was online. They weren't. Well, they probably were very knowledgeable what they did, but the way they were teaching wasn't very great. The Americans, no, there's nothing against Americans, but they just happen to be Americans, and they sounded a bit like that guy from the Silent Bang ad, very
All
hyper.
right.
And
Yeah.
Mike, what are you doing now?
Yeah.
To me, a kind of
Yeah.
yeah, it was too much for me,
Yeah.
so I gave up on it.
Uh,
So, but for my sins
well,
now, I'm presenting shows and stuff like that. So that's
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, they're doing a great job.
yeah,
Shout
but
out to the O&E team in Limerick. I was at the Veterans Conference yesterday, and Des Cullen and the boys from Limerick were up from Sarsfield branch. So I had a great chat with them. So if anybody wants to see a copy of From Terror to Valor, Echoes and Shadows in paperback form, I sent one down with Des. So the O&E branch on Edward Street in Limerick
okay.
um, is where they can
Well,
find it.
actually,
You can learn more about O&E too. Yeah.
that's great because that's actually across from our studio. Believe it or
Really?
not. Yeah, because we're
Wow.
actually we're in Lord Adder Street, but it's the address is actually called Barrack Square. We're actually across from the barracks. So yeah, so that's good. But
You should drop in and say hi. Tell them John Mulhall sent you in.
I
All
will
right.
certainly do that. So John, thanks for the chat. And just before we go, two more questions. One is just where can we buy the book? Is it
Yep.
online?
It is, yeah. It's available over 19 digital stores, including Amazon, Apple Books, Google Play. It's available over paperback, ebook. I'll try that one again. Ebook, paperback, and also audiobook. So it's widely available. I went wide with the distribution, but for Amazon users, yeah, if you just look up From Terror to Valor, you can buy it on paperback or ebook.
Okay.
And Google Play is the place to go for audiobook, ebook, and Apple Books will have it on ebook.
Okay. So it's widely available, and so that's good.
Wide,
So,
indeed.
and the last question then is, and I asked this to most of my guests, and it's kind of totally unrelated, but what is your favorite piece of music or song? Because at the end, we want to do a bit of a soundtrack as well in a few weeks' time on songs that our guests like. So,
Okay, all right. Wow. Okay, so I would say Nightwish is my favorite band, and Planet are also up there in my favorites. And oh wow, which one would be my favorite? Celtic World, I think it's called. Uh, or Cree from Planet. I'll put that. It means Braveheart.
yeah,
Cree.
uh,
Uh, so
Canada's a great band, all right. I've seen them live once or twice. So yeah, that's great.
very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, we'll put that on our playlist as well, and probably even include this after this interview as well. So yeah, again, thanks for this. I'm
Fantastic.
sure we'll talk again at some stage, and hopefully you'll continue writing a bit more, and hopefully may there be many books coming from John A. Mulhall.
Uh, and many are in the pipeline. So looking
Good.
forward to it.
Very good.
Thanks very much, Dirk.